Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
Hello everybody, Chocolate Guy here, and welcome back to the final part of this countdown. I have nothing to say before we get back into the list, other than if you haven't seen the other two parts, go watch those first. And with that said, this list has taken long enough to be completed and released, so let's jump right back into it. Here is my list of the top 5 best Owl House Season 1 episodes. So this is one that grew on me a ton watching it again, and landed higher than I would have originally put it. Watching it the first time, I thought it was a fun episode that had some really cool moments, but was a little cliched in places. But I loved it on rewatch, and I think this episode actually bends the cliche of learning something in a non-conventional and slower-paced way, doing stuff that doesn't seem like it connects with what you're actually trying to learn in a really cool and fitting way. The story is so good here because of this, and because this episode has some of the strongest character writing of the season. But moving forward on the list, that's kind of a given. But they especially do a great job with it here. You really understand why Luce is frustrated with Ida and how slow her lessons are moving, because she really isn't learning anything, and she has the pressure of needing to learn a second spell to get into the cool classes at Hexside. And having Amity be involved in the story was a great choice, because we not only get some fun relationship building with the two of them, starting off the episode as more acquaintances and ending it being friends, but it also gives Luce another reason to be insecure about her own magic skills. And the rate at which she is learning, which makes the stakes for her feel higher than they already are. Both characters also go through great arcs and overcome different challenges as they learn magic, which is fun to watch. Ida also has great motivation for teaching Luce in a slower, more non-conventional way because of her own views on magic, but also because she doesn't really understand how Luce's powers work, so she tries to put her in a situation and give her the tools to figure it out on her own. This is why this cliche is used so well here, because it fits for these characters and this world. This story is just so good, and has a lot of cool things going for it, which leads to some great twists and turns, some fun action, and both Amity and Luce learning new things and becoming better witches through it. This is set up so well throughout the episode and gets a great payoff. Especially the moment when Luce learns a second spell, which is the best scene of the episode. The way they slowly build up to that moment in the beautiful way she uses her environment to figure this out makes this moment just so exciting. And Amity learning to use some new spells without the training wand is another cool moment because of how it's built up to, though not as hard-hitting or as big as the Luce one. And on top of all of that, the atmosphere and setting are great, and this really elevates the story, as the setting can go from being this beautiful inspiration to this horrible place with monsters in a second. They have a lot of fun with the environment, and it makes that great reveal of Luce's second spell all the more atmospheric and beautiful, because of this environment and the way they show off the spell makeup through the snow and through the glyph design in the stars. It's just so insanely cool. But for how many amazing things I have to say about this one, what holds it back is while I like the subplot as it has some really good jokes and lines, and I think it breaks up the main plot well, it doesn't really connect to anything, and it does make the pacing of the episode kind of weird. And while I love this story, the individual conflicts could have been fleshed out just a little bit more. Look, these are minor problems, but it is what holds this one back from being any higher, especially compared to some steep competition. Still, this is a strong one, and a great way to start the top 5. This is an episode I bet people were expecting me to put in at least the top 3. But while I love this one, it's the last episode of the season I consider to be great and not exceptional, even if this episode is truly something special. The story is just a lot of fun and has a great setup that makes the stakes of the episode feel really high. And I love how the episode plays around with the cliches of going into someone's mind and exploring their memories. Willow was a cool character to have her mind be examined like this because we know an amount about her, but the show hasn't developed her that much up until this point, and this episode paints a great portrait of her. The pairing of Luce and Amity trying to put Willow's memories back together, being loose friends, is really fun, and we get a lot of great interactions between them. This episode also has some great twists, with why the memories are still being burned after they're fixed, and what Amity is hiding. On that note, it is really cool that not only do we use this story to learn more about Willow and her life, but you mostly learn about her relationship with Amity, and the episode slowly uses that to transition into learning more about and developing Amity's character, near the end especially. It's impressive how this episode manages to develop both these characters in an interesting way through showing the struggles in their relationship, and because of this, there's so many great character moments. And these moments do a really great job developing the characters. And through all of this, the episode gets really suspenseful and slowly builds to a great final scene where you don't know exactly how these two are gonna work things out, which makes Amity revealing why she treated Willow so badly and distanced herself from her, and actively trying to make amends such a powerful ending, because you've seen throughout the episode how close the two of them were and how deeply their falling out affected them in different ways. This is especially powerful because of all the detail in Willow's memories we learn from Amity being there, giving context and putting things into perspective, making their relationship all the more fleshed out and interesting. The atmosphere is also really cool, and the setting of Willow's mind is an interesting one as well, and as I've said, they do many fun things with it. The episode is truly impressive and really develops its characters through a great story in a cool setting and makes everyone involved a stronger character moving forward, including Luce, who I haven't mentioned a ton, but gets closer to Willow and especially Amity here. So if the episode is this impressive, why is it not any higher? Well, the episode is paced kind of weirdly, and the story development is a little underdeveloped for this reason. While we learn a lot about Willow, I wish we would have gotten to learn just a bit more about her and her relationship with Amity to make the story progression a little more interesting and to make the ending hit even harder. Because as it stands, what we do get to see is great, but not all of it is the most interesting or in-depth as it could have been, and we could have seen more to make the story just a little more interesting overall, and the setup to the climax even better. And while I like the subplot, I think this is one of the few cases in the season where even if I do like it, I think it could have been cut to make time for some more interesting character work in the main story, and to see more memories. Even if I think these are minor issues, as I think the episode does a great job telling an amazing story and developing its characters and making them deal with real struggles that they have to work through. And I really do like the subtle character work we do get. These little things keep it below the top 3, which are so strong and some of the best episodes that Owl House has to offer. So let's get into that. So at number 3, we have the season finale, and this was another episode that grew on me a lot watching it again. I loved it the first time, but it's now one of my favorite episodes of the show. It's a top tier episode, and an incredible finale that wraps up some things in the season while leaving on a crazy cliffhanger. The darker tone of this one is just so striking, and makes this episode feel so much bigger and very different from everything that's come before, and is a great way to present Luz's story after the cliffhanger from last episode, and it makes this one super engaging and unique. I love this story and how personal Luz's quest is after what happened in the last episode, and how high the stakes are here if she fails at saving Ida and stopping the Emperor, and how they slowly get higher and higher as the episode goes on. I also love how after all season of slowly setting up this world and learning a little bit about the Emperor in the last episode and seeing him for the first time there, we finally get a full picture at the beginning of this one of what the public knows about him. But the episode keeps who he truly is and his real goals a mystery. And the episode keeps building more mystery around him as the plot goes on, making what the stakes could possibly be if he gets a hold of the portal, and the different challenges Luz has to face surrounding her conflict with the Emperor and his forces all the more interesting. There are just a lot of great twists and turns in this episode for this reason, and it's just a blast to see Luz maneuver her way through all the different challenges and different twists that are thrown her way to succeed at her mission. And it's cool to see all the new information we learn about this world around that. I will say, as a minor drawback to that, there isn't as much usual great character work and writing here, because this one is more story-driven and is more focused on wrapping up the story of Season 1, while hitting you with a lot of information to have the perfect cliffhanger. But I think this is fine, because as I said, it does all of this super well, and it fits the tone of the episode that this one would be more story-driven than character-driven. But we do still get some great character moments throughout, as this episode really shows where everyone's values lie, and what's most important to them, and what they're willing to give up to protect that, especially Luz. The character moments we do get in this episode are great, but Luz really does do the heavy lifting in this department. Even if King, Ida, and Lilith all have their moments, especially when Lilith switches sides. The last thing I want to mention is Emperor Belos' appearance here is so good. He is such an interesting antagonist with a really defined persona, but there's so much mystery around the extent of his power, his actual goals, and who he really is, which makes him such an interesting threat for Luz to go up against. He also has a great design and voice. The ending conflict with him is amazing, as you really get to feel how powerful he is and how different he is from every other threat in the show, and is leagues above everyone else in terms of absolute power and skill. And it makes the uncertainty of who he is and what his plans are so much scarier, and the stakes of stopping him a lot higher as well, which have been built throughout the episode but hit a peak here because of how much power in multiple ways he has and what he might do if Luz doesn't stop him. And how in this quick fight with him, Luz doesn't stand a chance, but does get one hit, which does reveal he isn't invincible, but also leads to even more questions. And all of this leads to that incredible ending and cliffhanger, which I've alluded to a few times, but the fact that Luz is so concerned about the prospects of Belos gaining access to the human realm and what he might do, that she thinks the only way to stop him is to destroy her way home, and goes through with this to save the people she loves, even if it means she may never see her mother again. It's just so powerful and shocking, and really blew my mind the first time I watched it. It just really caught me off guard. But this is offset by a very sweet final scene, but it still leaves you on a crazy cliffhanger with what's gonna happen next. I've praised this one long enough, and I know after all of that you're probably dumbfounded that this isn't number one, and honestly I don't really have a good reason for it not to be. I don't really have any real issues with this masterpiece of a finale. All I can say is the top 3 episodes on this list are all masterpieces that were very close together in quality, and you could make an argument for all of them being number 1. But the next 2 do a slightly better job at what they try to achieve, and I enjoy them slightly more. So, let me explain why. So while the finale is fantastic, I think the episode setting it up is just slightly better, because this episode is just everything the first season does well at its best, and pushes the boundaries of what the show can do in its second half, which the finale does as well, but I think this is overall the better package because of the way this episode bends cliches the show has created up until this point to create a really amazing episode that sets up to the season finale perfectly. How it does this is the episode starts as this fun field trip to the Emperor's Palace, and I love how much lore we get into in this episode after a season of not really focusing a ton on the Emperor's Covenant or the Covenant system in general, but getting hints of stuff throughout. To see so much information here we get on the Emperor's Covenant and the Covenant system while still leaving some stuff a mystery for later is really cool. But alongside this interesting information we learn, we set up Luz's clear goal of getting this healing item to heal Ida's curse. And this episode plays out at first like you would expect a Season 1 Owl House episode to play out, with Luz going through with a weird scheme to achieve her goal that's elevated by her mission being so damn endearing. You really want to see her help Ida. The location of the Emperor's Castle is really cool, and there's a lot of great jokes throughout. But at the same time as this, they establish Lilith's goal and show that she is not messing around anymore, especially with the introduction of the Emperor, who is a much bigger part of the next episode, but is still cool here. And they once again show how much Ida and Luz care for each other and how badly Ida's curse is progressing, to give the main plot some more stakes on top of everything else. But even though the episode slowly feels like the tides are turning in some way and something big is gonna happen to really shake things up, the first half plays out in a pretty straightforward manner besides some of the lore dumps I mentioned, which makes Luz's plan completely falling apart and her ending up getting captured by Lilith all the more surprising and hard-hitting, because this show has spent an entire season using and mastering this kind of episode formula just to throw us for this curveball, which leads to an amazing back end of the episode. The last 5 minutes of this episode are just insanely great. The fight between Lilith and Ida is so good and is the best fight scene of the season. The stakes are so high for so many different reasons because of how much both Ida and Luz care for each other and what it would mean if Ida did what she needed to do to save Luz and use too much of her power. And through this, we have a great reveal about how Lilith was the one who cursed Ida, and the ending is so heartbreaking. The moment before Ida turns fully into the beast destroys me because of how well they have developed these characters and their relationship throughout the season. And you feel how deeply hurt Luz is by this and how much Ida and Luz cared for one another. And on top of all of that, you see after Ida is captured just how shattered Luz is by the mistakes she has made up until this point, and even stuff that isn't her fault, but is just so devastated by what has just happened. And after having to feel that pain as she walks all the way home. And that ending where she falls on the floor is one of the most powerful moments of the show, and a perfect ending to this episode and a great cliffhanger. So this episode just really messes around with expectations in the best way, to create a masterpiece of a second to last episode in a season, and I like it slightly more than the actual finale for that reason. But even with all that said, there is still one more episode that topped it. So yeah, while the other episodes were close, Enchanting Grom Fight was my favorite on first viewing, and watching it again for this ranking, that has not changed. I adore everything about this one, and there is no other episode I enjoy watching more. Every choice this episode makes is just the best one. I love the setup to this episode. The premise is just so good. The way it bends cliches around prom-like event-centered stories by telling one involving a teen fighting a fear monster at an awkward school dance is so much fun, and is an absolute perfect blend of different plot elements. But I think the setup and story in general works so well because of how likable and brave Luce is here, and it makes you really invested in seeing her come out on top against this monster. I think the choice of having Amity be the person who was actually picked to fight Grom, and Luce taking her place, is such a good one. A different version of this story, and the one that probably would have been easier to write, is Luce gets picked, and the entire episode is her being nervous, but being inspired to overcome her fears. But no, they went with a much more interesting option. As I said, having her take Amity's place when she doesn't have to is really cool, because while they are friends, they're not that close at this point, which makes you want to see her take down the monster even more, because it's really admirable of her to do this, because it shows that she would really do this for anybody, because she's just a good person. And the fact that she is nervous, but is willing to fight through it when she doesn't have to, just makes her so likable and interesting, and a commendable character who's fun to watch in their journey. But through this, they do a great job setting up the mystery of what Amity's fear is, with her not being able to take on Grom herself because of it, and they also set up a great fake out with Luce's fear. From the beginning, you know her fear has to do with her relationship with her mother and the secret she has been keeping from her, but they do enough throughout the episode, but especially when she is training, to make it seem like Ida's views on Luce really does bother her. And I genuinely think it does. So when she does confront Grom, I at least thought the Ida thing would play a bigger part and maybe be the true fear she fights, but then after that's what it looks like is gonna happen, it transforms into her mother. But they also do a good job, as I said, showing that something is deeply bothering her about what's going on between her and her mother before this point. I guess this does lead me into the Grom fight itself. The moment right before Luce goes out to fight Grom is so sweet. You really get to see how far these two have come in their relationship and are finally pretty good friends. And through Amity talking to Luce about how she is being so fearless, it once again reestablishes how much of a good, selfless person Luce is, which makes her struggling with the idea if she is a good person when she is lying to her mother all the more interesting. And the situation escalates when she actually takes on Grom. It gets more and more intense as you see Luce surprise everyone and do pretty well until the beast fakes her out and turns into her mom. And this is such a cool moment because you don't know exactly how this monster fully works. It actually fooled me the first time into thinking her mom was really there. In between all of this, you have a nice subplot with King. While it isn't really that noteworthy, it breaks up the intense story well, and fits the theme of the episode, and is genuinely really sweet. But the best part of this episode is when Luce leaves Hexside. The ending of this episode is outstanding. Luce realizing she can't do this, but Amity coming to help, and her fear being revealed, and it being different than most were expecting, as the episode kind of sets it up like it would be about her parents to connect with Luz's fear, but her fear of rejection and bringing the note back from earlier as a cool callback, and having the person be in shadow is a cool but heartbreaking moment and makes this reveal of her feelings for Luz through all of this all the more interesting, because of how much her fear of rejection clouds those feelings. And after that, when they confront their fears by dancing together and creating a spell to take down Grom, it's just so cool, and is one of the best scenes of the show. If nothing else, this whole ending sequence makes this episode number one, because of how cool it is and how much it says about its characters after everything they've been through, that they're able to find solace in each other while defeating Grom, and this fits the dance theme of the episode, and it's just a really upfront and great showcase of LGBTQ representation at the same time, while pushing boundaries for an animated series on Disney Channel for this reason, which the show would only continue to do in the future. It also wraps up what the episode was building to through multiple different scenes and plot points, and creates interest about what's going to happen next involving Lumity and where these characters' journeys are going to go next, because this is the most interesting Luz and Amity get all season, especially that reflective after high of an ending, which wraps up the episode on an amazing note. There's even a cool mystery setup at the very end as well. This episode was really the start of a lot of great things for the show. Enchanting Grom Fight is just incredible. It does everything right. It shows off everything about Owl House Season 1 at its absolute best, and it is episodes like these that make its characters this interesting and are so ambitious, and even push boundaries of what kind of stories you can tell and what themes and representation you can address and showcase in a show like this that turns a great show into one of the best, making it the best episode of Owl House Season 1. And with that, the list is done. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more videos similar to this in the future. Also, thank you guys so much for waiting for the entirety of this list to be released, and I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you thought of my list and what your own would have been in the comments below. I will be releasing an Owl House Season 2 list eventually, but coming next will be an amount of Hey Arnold Season 1 episode reviews, starting with a review of Arnold's Hat. And with all that said, until next time, this is Chocolate Guy, signing off.